The morning had barely begun when the chaos started. Inside Willow Springs Cafe, the clinking of cups and soft jazz music filled the air, but no one noticed the pale young mother at the corner table struggling to stay upright. Her vision blurred, her hands trembled, and the room seemed to tilt sideways. Moments later, her body slumped forward, the mug of coffee slipping from her fingers and spilling across the table. People gasped, chairs scraped, and someone shouted for help. But in the midst of the noise, a man rose faster than anyone else. His heart pounded when he saw her collapse. And before anyone could process what was happening, he rushed forward, pushed aside the crowd, and scooped the unconscious mother into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. That was the moment everything changed. When a single dad named Ethan Carter unknowingly stepped into the most important chapter of her life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unexpected miracles, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more stories of humanity to the world. Her name was Grace Turner, a 30-year-old mother who had been fighting a battle no one saw. She wasn't homeless, but she lived paycheck to paycheck. She wasn't helpless, but she was exhausted to the bone. She wasn't alone, but loneliness had settled deep inside her, ever since her husband abandoned her shortly after she gave birth to their daughter, Lily. Life had been a relentless storm for her, and that morning, she had barely eaten after working a night shift at the laundromat. She stopped at the cafe hoping for a 5-minute break, a moment to breathe. But her body, deprived of rest and nutrition, finally gave out. Ethan was no stranger to hardship himself. A single father raising his 6-year-old son, Noah, he knew what it felt like to face the world with nothing but determination. His wife, Emily, had passed from cancer 3 years earlier, leaving him devastated, shattered, and suddenly responsible for being both mother and father. He worked 2 jobs, fixing HVAC units during the day and delivering groceries in the evenings. He brought Noah to the cafe that morning because it was the rare day the boy didn't have school, and Ethan wanted to treat him to pancakes before heading to a repair appointment, but fate had different plans. Ethan carried Grace outside, feeling the tremble of her fragile frame. She was light as air, clearly too thin, and she looked as though she hadn't rested in weeks. He laid her on a bench under the cafe's awning and whispered soft reassurances, trying to coax her back to consciousness. The cafe workers scrambled to bring water, and a few customers hovered anxiously. Noah stood quietly near his father, clutching his small backpack, watching the scene with wide, worried eyes. The moment Grace's eyelids fluttered open, Ethan felt a wave of relief. But the fear in her eyes hit him hard. Fear of being judged, fear of being a burden, fear of being seen. She tried to sit up too quickly, wincing as dizziness washed over her. Ethan steadied her with gentle hands, telling her she was safe. Grace felt embarrassed but also strangely comforted. When her gaze landed on Noah, who offered her a shy smile and a small packet of gummy bears, her throat tightened. She hadn't met kindness like that in a long time. Grace kept insisting she was fine and didn't want to cause trouble, but Ethan knew better. He could see the signs: dehydration, exhaustion, stress that weighed on her like an invisible chain. When she admitted she hadn't eaten yet that day, he didn't hesitate. He asked Noah to stay beside her while he went inside the cafe, telling the cashier to pack the biggest breakfast they had, adding a juice and an extra pastry. He didn't care about the cost. Some moments in life were about doing the right thing, not counting dollars. As Grace ate slowly, almost timidly, Ethan watched her with a quiet sense of recognition. He had been there, the days of skipping meals so his son could eat, the nights of crying silently in the dark because he didn't know how to keep going. The mornings waking up determined to fight for a better life, despite everything stacked against him. He saw the same fight inside Grace, but also a weariness far heavier than she let on. They talked softly as she recovered, sharing fragments of their stories. Grace revealed she was raising her 3-year-old daughter alone and juggling multiple jobs to pay rent on a tiny studio apartment. Her husband had left when their baby was still in the hospital, unable to handle the responsibilities of fatherhood. Since then, Grace had been surviving on grit alone. Ethan shared his own loss, the pain of losing Emily, and the struggles of single fatherhood. Instead of pity, they found understanding, rare, genuine understanding. It didn't end there. When Grace tried to leave, her knees buckled slightly. Ethan instinctively reached out to support her again. He insisted on driving her home. Grace hesitated, embarrassed, but finally agreed. Noah held her hand as they walked to the truck, telling her it was okay, that his dad always helped people. Something in her heart softened at the innocence of that small gesture. It had been a long time since kindness felt that pure. The ride to her apartment was quiet but warm. Grace apologized repeatedly for being a burden, but Ethan stopped her gently. He told her that sometimes people need help, even the strongest ones. When they arrived, Ethan noticed the neighborhood wasn't unsafe but worn down, tired like the people who lived in it. He carried her grocery bags from the back seat, bags she confessed she had bought days earlier but hadn't eaten due to lack of time and energy. He placed them on the small kitchen counter of her tiny, cluttered but clean apartment. Standing there, Ethan glimpsed the reality of her life. A small crib in the corner, children's clothes folded on the couch, bills stacked neatly on the table, signs of a mother who tried despite everything. His heart tightened. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't irresponsible. She was fighting alone, the way he once had. That day should have ended there, but it didn't. Ethan checked on her later, bringing a homemade chicken noodle soup he had cooked for Noah. Grace cried quietly after he left, overwhelmed by a kindness she didn't know she deserved. Days turned into weeks, and slowly a beautiful rhythm formed. Ethan would drop by with meals, offer rides when she was exhausted, or watch Lily for an hour while Grace napped. Noah adored Grace, and Lily adored Ethan. Their small, broken families naturally began intertwining without force, without expectation, just as though life itself was stitching them together. Grace found strength she thought she had lost. She started eating regularly again, regained her energy, and even found a better-paying job at the local library when Ethan encouraged her to apply. Ethan found something he hadn't felt in years: hope. He saw in Grace a softness that helped heal the wounds he'd buried deep within. He saw the way she loved her daughter, gentle and fierce. He saw her resilience, her quiet faith, her determination to rise again. Still, both battled their own fears. Grace feared trusting again. Ethan feared loving again. But their connection grew, steadily, tenderly, naturally. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, just everyday moments. Cooking together, sharing stories while the kids played on the carpet, laughing over small things, comforting each other after long days. And in these moments, something profound blossomed. Not rushed, not forced, but real. One evening, months after the cafe incident, they stood on Grace's small balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky. The kids were asleep inside. The air was cool, soft. Grace whispered that she didn't know what she would have done if Ethan hadn't been there that day. Ethan looked at her, really looked, and felt certainty settle in his chest. Some people come into your life by accident, some by choice, and some arrive exactly when God knows you need them. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that kindness still exists in this world, please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement truly helps us continue sharing stories that inspire. Special request: before you watch the ending, comment below. Kindness can change a life. Grace didn't faint again after that day, but her life transformed completely. She went from merely surviving to actually living. She smiled more. She slept better. She felt supported, understood, and valued. Ethan, too, discovered that his heart could love again, that helping someone wasn't a burden but a blessing, that healing often comes in the form of another wounded soul trying their best. In time, their quiet companionship grew into something sacred. They built a home, not a fancy one, but a warm one. A home filled with children's laughter, shared meals, late-night talks, prayers whispered over sleeping kids, and a love that came unexpectedly but beautifully. Grace never forgot the moment she fainted at that cafe, the moment she thought she had reached her limit, but she also never forgot the strong arms that lifted her when she fell, the kind voice that told her she was safe, and the gentle presence of a single father whose kindness changed everything. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin on the ordinary days. Sometimes God sends the right person, not when you want them, but when you need them most. And sometimes a stranger carrying you out of a cafe is the beginning of a love story written by grace itself.